Good morning everyone. I am Ishika Mandal from Standard 10, going to give a presentation on Civil Disobedience Movement. Civil Disobedience Movement was a movement started by Gandhiji. He started from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, the coastal town of Gujarat. On 31st January 1930, he sent a letter to Lord Irwin stating his 11 demands that these negotiations should be done within 11th March 1930. Else he need to start a civil disobedience campaign. Unfortunately, none of his negotiations were done. So, in 12th March 1930, he, along with his 78 followers, started from Sabarmati to Dandi, the coastal town of Gujarat, with a distance of 240 miles for 24 days, each day 10 miles. At last, at 6th April 1930, he reached Dandi. On his way, many people and women came to hear his speech. They became very influenced, and they all participated in the movement. As you know, that if people get influenced, they start the agitation first, rather than the leader. The same thing happened over here. Many people they started the agitation, and many got arrested. Almost more than 10,000 people got arrested, and women and children were brutally repressed. The colonial government, in to take a revenge, they started arresting all of them, and finally, like all the big political leaders were all arrested. Gandhiji, he had to call off the movement at last, and went into the Gandhi-Irwin Pact on 5th April 1931, and there he promised that he will do the second roundtable conference in London. Finally, in December 1931, he goes to London with his condition that these political prisoners should be released. Unfortunately, none of them were released, and whenever he went to London also, his negotiations were not done properly. So he returned back disappointed and was shocked to listen all this and even see all this. The leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, the Frontier Gandhi, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan were all arrested. Even the Congress party was declared as illegal party. So in 1932 he again started the movement, but in 1934 it completely lost its momentum. So this was something about the civil disobedience movement. Now coming to the causes of civil disobedience movement. First, Dandi March. Dandi March, it was for the abolition of salt law. Abolition of salt law means that means breaking the colonial law. So and civil disobedience means disobeying the colonial laws. So this was one of the cause of civil disobedience movement. Second cause, Rowlatt Act. Rowlatt Act, it was an act passed by the Imperial Legislative Council where a political prisoner will be detained without any trial. This was an agitation for the civil disobedience movement. Then Jallianwala Bagh massacre. It was the day when General Dyer entered into the Jallianwala Bagh, where people were celebrating were celebrating Baisakhi festival. He killed hundreds and hundreds of innocent people, where women and children also died. This was also a cause for agitation among the masses. Then the fourth can be Chori Chora incident. Chori Chora incident, it held like at the last moment of the non-cooperation movement. 22 policemen were killed by the masses. But as Mahatma Gandhi suddenly called off the non-cooperation movement, hence this agitation where it got repressed, but it came up in civil disobedience movement. Now some of the effects of civil disobedience movement. First of all, it is participation of women. In all the movements, as we have seen, there was no participation of women at a majority state. But in civil disobedience movement, due to his campaigning in many villages, many people and women, they came up and protested against the civil disobedience movement. So this was one of the effect. Second effect, in non-cooperation movement, as we have seen, it was only in the urban areas, but in civil disobedience movement, it got spread to many countryside part also, even in the northwestern borders also. So it was the second effect. Third effect, it can be like many people they joined the civil disobedience movement. So whatever it can be, the two main causes were these only. Now, the different social groups which participated in the civil disobedience movement, they were rich peasant families, then poor peasant families, rich businessmen, the industrial workers, and women. The rich peasant families, like Jats of Uttar Pradesh and in Gujarat, they were Pathans. They were all doing well, but in 1930, due to the great economic depression, they were hard hit and they were unable to pay their revenual taxes. They urged the government that to reduce the revenual taxes, but they refused. Hence, they participated in the civil disobedience movement. The first was rich peasant families. Second, the less means the poor peasant families. They were already suffering from the rent payment. The INC, Indian National Congress, that party was reluctant to join the no rent campaign because they were thinking that if they support the the poor peasant families, then the rich peasant families and even the businessmen, they will be agitated and may not support them. So the less peasant families, they did not support in the civil disobedience movement. Then comes the businessmen. Businessmen from the First World War, they were like expanding their business to a high extent. But unfortunately, due to some uneven colonial laws, their trade was got a setback. Hence, the societies like IICC, which formed in 1920, and FICCI, which formed in 1927 under the leadership of Purushottam Das Thakur Das and G.D. Birla, they started going against the colonial laws. Hence, this was also this social group also participated in it. But unfortunately, after the second roundtable conference, there were some changes in the INC, like the socialist ideas started to come up. So the businessmen, they started setting back from the civil disobedience movement. Then it comes the industrial workers. Industrial workers did not participate in that much majority part as of the other social groups. So next comes the fifth one, women. As you have know that participation of women was in a large extent. Hence, these five social groups participated in the civil disobedience movement. Hence, with this speech, I am wrapping up my speech here. Thank you.